Hello, world. Welcome to Speed Strength Show. I'm Tommy.
And I'm Braden. And what is your favorite throwback song?
Ooh.
And I guess
Uh,
you can define what your throwback is, like what that era means to you, because I know you listen to a lot of older music anyway, but older music might not necessarily mean throwback.
no, like the first thing I thought of when you said throwback was not necessarily to like a different decade of music or, outside, something like that, but more so like back in time in your own like journey through life.
Hmm.
Like your middle school music or your high school music or,
Hmm.
stuff like that. So is that what you're looking for? More like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, 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 yeah. Like what was like your favorite songs from like back in the day? You know,
Like how back in the day?
whatever you want, whatever,
Ooh.
whatever. I guess like for me, my favorite like musical era, I guess, was like high school, like early mid high school was like those are the when I think of throwback songs, it's those ones.
Yeah, I was defaulting the same thing. I was going to say like sort of like a grade seven, grade eight, grade nine. I
Mm,
think I got my first iPod in grade seven,
nice.
which is probably then when, you know, things would have, me and music would have got serious. Right. And then
Yeah.
you start to like listen to things more intentionally and
Hmm.
stuff like that. So I think that would be the period I would pick. And if you go back and look at my iPod, there's like, I'm trying to think of who would be on, like Alexis on Fire was on there, talked about them in some of the listening. Um, Rise Against would have been on there
Nice. Yeah.
before they got soft.
I
Not
like
they went so
them.
they went a different direction. It's not necessarily bad, but they're like some of their first two albums where it was they were in sort of the same wheelhouse as like Alexis on Fire and
What were some of those popular songs on those ones?
I want to say uh, was the name of the song "Give It All"? I think it was in Need for Speed
Yeah,
Underground.
that was a good one. Yeah.
Was that
Give
Underground
it all.
2 it was in?
I don't know. I
I
didn't
think
play that
it
game.
was in one of them. But yeah, so stuff like Rise Against had a lot of Rancid on that iPod, um, punk band. So stuff like that. And then as I got into high school, then I started to add a little bit more of the, you know, Maiden shows up, Metallica shows up, like Slayer, Anthrax, the Big Four, a little bit of Ozzy, Black Sabbath, all that started sort of stuff starts to get thrown in. So then I'm starting to explore some heavier stuff, but from like genres earlier and then starting to go into the future. And then it just gets heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier. It's sort of like weightlifting or
Mm,
like resistance training. Like you start
nice.
out at a certain weight and you just kind of, at first lifting 100 pounds seems like the most daunting thing in the world.
Hmm.
But then you get stronger and stronger and you have to lift heavier and heavier. And I found my music has just done the same thing. Like stuff that when I like trying to think, for example, when I first heard Slayer, I was like, okay, like it's like uncomfortably heavy.
Mm.
Even though they're in the same wheelhouse as like Metallica or somebody like that, I was like, oh, okay, this is like maybe a little too heavy. And now I'm pretty sure like I could use Slayer's lullaby music if I needed to. Like, because you just become like more and more, and you're just, that's almost how I would describe it. It's a little bit like your resistance training journey. But that
Yeah.
would be the throwback for me, probably that period, like that first iPod that you got. And you're like, okay, what was on there? And that was the type of stuff that was there.
Nice.
Alexis on Fire, Rise Against, Billy Talent. Those would probably be like the three that probably stick out to me
Hmm.
the
Very
most.
cool.
And
Very
obviously, two
cool.
of them being Canadian bands, and uh, Alexis on Fire, Billy Talent.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, Billy Talent would be in my like early. The first like CD that was mine was a friend gave me a Billy Talent CD for my birthday one
Which
year.
one?
It was the first one, Billy
Oh,
Talent.
nice, nice.
Uno. Yeah, or just that was just Billy Talent was the name of
Yeah,
the
because then
CD.
they went Billy Talent 2, Billy Talent 3.
Yeah,
They got very creative with their naming system.
and then was it four, and then it was Afraid of Heights, I think, or I can't remember if the fourth one was called four or not.
When did Yeah, because Afraid of Heights came out. We were working together at Waterloo, I think, when Afraid of Heights came out.
Yes, I think
So that
so.
was 16. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it might have. I think you're right. I think it was Billy Talent 4.
Because that was
And
the one
then,
that was like, I don't know if cover. It was the one that it was like green and black and it had like doves or something on the cover. Something like
oh,
that.
that might have
I
been
have the first
3.
4. Oh, yeah, that was 3. And then it was Dead Silence.
That's it.
It was Dead Silence. That was it was the blue cover with, I don't remember what the art was, but it was blue.
Sort of had like an underwater ish.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Great band.
Yeah, man. Yeah, they have a like that's one of those. Remember we were talking about, well, I guess a few different albums where it's like half of it's good or like a third of it's good. Billy Talent, I feel like for me anyway, like 75% of the songs on every single album are good.
Yeah, there's always a few that stick out to you. And then you put the album on and then you realize you just sung along with the entire album and you liked
Mhm.
every song. You're like, oh, this whole album is actually really, really good.
Yeah, definitely. Like I remember like going through the albums the first time, yeah, there's like a few songs that stick out and like I'll play those, like I'll skip around and play those ones. And then like more recently going back to it, thinking about like going through each song specifically, I was like, oh wow, yeah, these are all solid if you just give them the space. I guess like some stand out right away and some grow on you a little bit more over time, kind of thing.
But I would agree with that. Every single one of their albums, you give it enough listens and like at some point in time, every song on that album becomes your favorite song on that album.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I think like there's maybe a few that I don't know if I ever got there, but um yeah, I would say so. At some point, like most of them were the best. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a solid throwback choice though, I would say.
Yeah. Um and then yeah, like the first MP3 player was like grade, yeah, like 6, 7-ish, and would have been a lot of, yeah, Rise Against, Green Day, Disturbed.
Or
Um
Disturbed.
Disturbed. Yeah, I was a big fan. Me and my brother were big
Yeah.
fans of Disturbed back in the day. And then like the mid high school, when like the like high school dance songs, like TikTok by Kesha is like one of my favorites. um
Really?
yeah, and
Really?
yeah, and Yeah by Usher is also one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah. The other thing that I think we've failed to bring up, which I'm sort of surprised hasn't come up yet, but also the number of songs I listened to in that time frame of my life that came from video games.
Mm,
Because EA at the time was really pushing that whole we're moving music into the video game
mm-hmm,
realm and we're going to move it into the games and all the Madden. I didn't really play any other sports games, so I don't know what the soundtracks were like in you know FIFA or NHL or something like that.
the
But
NHL
the
ones were good.
yeah, the Madden soundtracks were very good. In the Need for Speed
Hmm.
soundtracks were also like very well done, and so there were probably honestly a lot of bands that I discovered and was like, oh, I'll give this band a listen to
Hmm.
because of like a song. Like I think Madden 05 or 06 had a song by Avenged Sevenfold.
Maybe the first one I had was '07, so I'm not sure, but yeah.
It might have been 05 or 06. One of them had, and I was like, oh, okay, this band's not bad. And then I think it was Need for Speed Most Wanted, I want to say, which came out somewhere in the same time frame, also had an Avenged Sevenfold song on. I was like, okay, these guys are good. And then it led me to go like, let me go explore more of the stuff that they've made. So there's definitely a number of bands that I first discovered, sort of call it in that grade 7 to 9 window,
Mm.
because of
Hmm.
like some of the video games I was playing that featured music that you may have never heard before.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a really good point. The Madden and the NHL had some really good soundtracks. Yeah, the issue I had with it though, like most of the songs that I liked, like I would go and check out the bands and like see what else they got going on. I'm like, oh man, they only had the one good song.
Oh, you're like, yeah, that they took the best that they had and put it in the game, and that was the
Yeah,
end of it.
yeah, and that song was really good, but damn, there's nothing else here, but yeah, like the Madden '07 were really, really good for me. And I had NHL 5, 6, and 7, and they were quite good too. The I can't remember the band's name, but "Take Me Out" was a song that's like it's
Oh, uh,
Franz Ferdinand. Yeah,
Franz Ferdinand. That's
yeah,
right.
yeah, and they do actually have a few songs that I like. They've got like 2 or 3 others that are I think are pretty good.
That's a great tune.
Yeah.
A
Yes.
really underrated track for
Yeah.
sure.
That is.
Yeah,
That is. So yeah, good stuff, man. Good stuff.
that was a fun one. That's been 2 good ones, and these nostalgic ones are good.
Well,
I'm like kind of enjoying these.
yeah. Well, I is yours. You teased me earlier with that a hint at the topic for next week. Is it also nostalgic or not?
No, not at all.
Okay. Well,
So we can take a little break and then come back to it again.
yeah. All right. Sounds good. But yeah, I guess it was a rare mid opening transition with the strength training and the heaviness of the music progressing over time. So we'll just circle back to that. I don't know how related that is to this episode, I guess, because kettlebells are not that heavy,
It
generally
depends.
speaking. I mean, generally speaking,
Yes.
I don't know. I guess if you're talking about 100 pounds being daunting, like 100-pound kettlebell maybe is daunting, depending on the exercise.
I was going to say, depending on what you're doing.
Mhm.
But yeah, kind of exploring the kettlebell today, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah, I guess just what can you do with it? What makes it special? Why does it exist and we don't just have dumbbells?
Or barbells or anything. And yeah, like just to jump right into it, if we're talking kettlebells, I think that's probably the most important thing to toss out there, that at the end of the day, it's a tool.
Yeah.
It's a tool for resistance training. And I think there's so many people, like, I don't know why people get like, I don't know who invented the barbell. They're probably dead. I don't know who invented the kettlebell. They're probably dead. Like,
Probably a Russian guy.
I would guess. But I don't understand the like emotional attachment people get to pieces of equipment. Like the ridiculous arguments that people get, like the barbell is better than the dumbbell. No, the dumbbell is better than the kettlebell. Like, I don't understand why people put themselves in these camps of like, oh, I'm a kettlebell person. Oh, I'm a barbell person. I'm a, dumbbell person. Because at the end of the day, these are all just tools for resistance training. And I think we've talked about this before. I don't know what this was like talking like 40 episodes ago, right? About some of like the physical traits that we develop. Like the body's stupid in the sense that it does, like, it's not going to know if you are pressing a barbell, a kettlebell, or a dumbbell. It just goes, the muscles and bones and tissues are under load. I need to respond and adapt in a certain way. Yeah. And so to me, the kettlebell is a tool. So I would try to avoid, like, there are people that say the kettlebell is the worst training tool in the world. And you know what? It's probably not the greatest for some things. But then there's people who are like, the kettlebell is the only thing you need. I'm like, wow, if you have more available, that would be good. So to me, it's like every other lifting tool, weight, whatever. It's somewhere in the middle. It's good for some things. It's not so great for other things. And it's a tool that you use at certain times. So like, I wouldn't describe, maybe get a bit of a rap as like kettlebell guy at times, but because I do own kettlebells and I do like them.
Yeah.
It's not the only thing I use though. Mm-hmm. So that would just be my first like open, like just to caution people, like, don't pick a camp. It's a tool. Yeah. How are you going to use it, and think about how you can best use it.
Yeah, that's a good opener, I would say, for sure. Yeah. I haven't heard anybody be so like, it's dumbbells or nothing. I've heard people be like,
it's actually true.
It's barbells for sure, or it's like kettlebells only, or like resistant bands only. I've heard that.
Oh.
I don't know, like for people who are just training, I don't really know why you would think that or say that, because it is nice, like you say, like some things are better for, like, if you want to get strong, then barbell's probably where
Yeah.
you want to be, and if you want to be a little bit more like functional,
I hate when you use that word.
or I guess we just finished talking about fascia, so we can maybe say elastic. Kettlebells might be a little bit better for elastic training or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Like,
then maybe kettlebells your way to go. Or if you want to be like none of the other options have like resistance that increases through the range of motion, so bands are great for that. And bands are also cheaper than everything else, so that's another positive as well. But I do think, like, just that when you're saying, like, talking about people in different camps, that reminded me of a story that Gary Gray told on a podcast that he was like Jay, it was part of Jay's mentorship thing, this podcast that he advertised anyway.
oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
um and it was like, I guess he was speaking with like people from Cybex maybe. um
Oh, they manufacture like the equipment, right? Like the machines and
yeah, it's like I think it's a specific kind of like a cable machine,
okay.
or like it might not be Cybex, it could be a or something, but it's some kind of a cable machine anyway, as like the best like rehab kind of a, like, all your rehab needs, you just need this machine and you're perfect, it can solve every single problem. And so then Gary Gray was talking like that doesn't make sense to me, like, you are shitting on my ideas, I guess I'm shitting on your ideas because it doesn't make sense to me. um how about we take a group of people and we just pick a goal, and like they said, like, increase vertical jumping from wherever they are, like, we'll just train them, I'll tell you exactly what I'm going to do, and you do whatever you want, I don't care, but you have to use the Cybex because you say it's like the only thing that you need, right? And then so he was explaining to them, like, what the stuff that I'm going to do is I'm going to have them jump, and it's going to be like every direction and a bunch of like different sort of like side and rotational, and because like he's very like three-dimensional, and functional, ground up, top down kind of stuff. And then the Cybex guy was like, oh, that's not fair, like, of course you're gonna win, you're doing jumping stuff. It's like, yeah, obviously, like, that's gonna make them better at jumping. Like, if you think that your thing is better at everything, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, tool for the job.
Exactly. So
Like, go find me a general contractor or someone who does work who goes, no, I don't need a screwdriver. That's a stupid tool. Like, at some point, you're going to need it.
yeah,
And so they have an assortment of wrenches and hammers and saws and screwdrivers. And
yeah.
like,
I'm actually more of a hammer guy. Thank you.
I use the hammer for everything.
Yeah, that's, when you put it that way, that's hilarious. That's funny.
That's me. So like, that's the part, like, you don't see craftspeople arguing over which, like, maybe this person's saw is better than this brand saw, for example, like
Mhm.
but they're all going to say, yeah, well, we all need saws because when we go to cut wood, we're not using a hammer. We're going to pick the right tool for the job. So that's like the first thing I think of when we, now that we're talking about like a specific piece of equipment for training, that, like, don't get caught up in it being either the worst tool or the best tool. It's just, it's a tool and it can do some things. So like, to me, I think it's important to highlight some of the strengths of that tool, maybe why you would want to have it available and what you might do with your athletes or clients or people you work with, but don't try to stretch it too far and reinvent the wheel and start doing all this ridiculous nonsense that
I will say quick, like, I do want to move on to like the strengths or like the things that kettlebells are better at. But really quick, like the COVID lockdown, like all that sort of stuff has been a good exercise in like what are, like, how can you do everything with a very small amount of equipment. And for me personally, training a lot of powerlifters, how can I do like accessory movements with just a barbell and free weights? And it's been an interesting exercise in creativity. But I
well,
think
that was
there's
an environment that really tested our ability as coaches, like you said, to, like, yeah, you were going to notice if your toolbox was pretty empty when COVID hit. Like coaches that had an empty toolbox were going to struggle versus coaches that, you know, maybe there's a second or third drawer on that toolbox that you've never had to go into. But you're like, oh, good thing I have this because now's the time I need to use it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So I guess what do you think that kettlebell's best for, or what are some of the strengths anyway?
As far as like as a piece of equipment, and I think just briefly touch on this, is that I mean they are compact and easy to move around
Hmm.
in the sense that if you wanted to combine, like it was nice because I could throw them in the hatch of my car, throw them in the hatch, drive to the track, you know, sprint around, take the kettlebell out of the back of the hatch, do some resistance training right there, go home.
Mm-hmm.
Right is where if you wanted to bring like barbells, plates, a squat rack, this and that track side to your sporting environment, for example, it's not as feasible. So I do think there is an element of convenience and ease as far as that goes. Like it's a lot easier to port around a kettlebell than it is an 8-foot barbell or 7 feet, whatever they are in length, right? You know, I mean, if you buy the right exercise equipment, everything's expensive. So, I mean, that's a whatever. But I do think there is something nice about the ease of moving around. But from a pure like sort of movement perspective, I think the three big things that I really like the kettlebell for is the swing. I don't think there's anything better for the swing. I like it from a pressing variation standpoint, and I'll expand on that a little bit after. And I think that the half rack position, where you kind of rest the kettlebell on one side, is a unique, like if you have them available, what would I go out and buy kettlebells just to half rack hold them? No. But if you have them available to you to train, it's a good variety. And those are the things that I don't know if you can do with any other piece of equipment as well. So that to me is the strength, where if you have kettlebells lying around and you're not sure how to use them, find a way to get the swing incorporated, find a way to bring some pressing variations in. And then I think the half rack, you know, position can offer a lot of unique twists and variations on probably things you're already doing within your program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% agree. I guess that's, if I had to choose, like there was, Brown and I bought a little bit of equipment and we were hoping to get some kettlebells. But they ended up going to somebody else and that was fine. But if I had to choose between dumbbells and kettlebells, I would choose kettlebells every time. Because I think you can do like 99% of the things dumbbells can do, kettlebells can do those too. But you will not be able to swing a dumbbell that well. You can, but it's not going to be that good. And the half rack and the bottoms up, which maybe was the pressing thing that you were going to allude to. The only thing I can think of that a dumbbell can do that is renegade rows, but I don't care that much about renegade rows. So
I was going to say flies, like a pec fly with a kettlebell would be.
no, you can do, well, you can do it.
I know, but I feel like it'd be pretty trash compared to a dumbbell. But I personally don't care for that exercise, so it would never.
It's just like all the loading for all of the upper body exercises, the loading is just different, but sometimes it's nice too. Like if you're doing like a pec fly or a like shoulder raise or anything like that, like the weight is a little bit further from your body and it moves around a little bit. So it's going to add like the smallest amount of perturbation, and increase the moment arm. So you don't have to like load it as heavily. So it's actually kind of nice from that perspective too. Sometimes like you choose to use a kettlebell for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to stay there, the thing that I like about the pressing that I find unique is that with almost every implement that you press, you are directly in line with the center of mass of the load that you're moving. As where the kettlebell offers this unique challenge where it's folded over your wrist. So it actually sits outside of, like, if I'm pressing overhead, well, my arm is upright and this is my line of action. but the center of mass that I'm moving is offset off of that. And that's whether I'm like floor pressing a kettlebell or benching a kettlebell or pressing it overhead. And I do think it's it's just a way to throw some variation into the pressing. You can only do bench press for so long, or do dumbbell bench or something like that. And it is a nice like skill challenge in a sense to your pressing pattern, your pressing movement, which I think especially for like a collision sport or a contact sport where you are pushing and applying force, like think of a lineman in football, you're not always going to be squared up directly in front of the person that you're making contact with. You might be doing like a chip block, for example, where it's offset, or in rugby, someone's moving to the left or the right of you, so you're a little bit offset. And so I think there is some benefit in terms of like, if you're looking for variation, if you're looking for ways to challenge a pressing pattern and the way that we apply force in a pressing motion, that having the kettlebell offset like that, the way that, because that's how you have to hold it, does offer a unique, it offers a change enough because you're acting through a different line of action. And the bottom up is a little bit the same way, where there's a level of instability and you have to apply your pressing pattern, your pressing force in a novel way that you may not be used to if you've only been applying force in a dumbbell or a barbell, where you can act like evenly on the center of mass of whatever load that you're moving. So I think there's some value to that. Again, would I go out and buy? Is it worth it for a gym to go out and spend $10,000 outfitting their place with kettlebells just for that? Probably not. But again, if you have them around and you're sick of dumbbell press or bench press or something like that, I think it offers a unique change up to the pattern and gives you some variation.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. And as I was thinking about this beforehand, like the ability to like, obviously the bottoms up is nice for the instability aspect and like a little bit of extra grip training. Racking it over the wrist is nice because, and it kind of like pulls you a little bit into external rotation, so you have to kind of internally rotate it to fight that. You could rack it the other way, like on the inside of your wrist, which would pull you into internal rotation, so you'd have to fight to external rotation. And you can also, like, depending on if you want to supinate or pronate your grip a little bit, like you can do all that. Or you can do the supination and pronation with a dumbbell too, or like a Swiss bar, or you can go underhand on a barbell.
Suicide grip.
Well, you can do suicide grip, but you can, like, instead of having overhand, you can go underhand too for a bench press. It's weird, but you can.
So I would just call that like dead grip, because there's no way you're gonna, like, you're just asking for trouble.
It's interesting. It's an interesting challenge. But yeah, with the nature of the weight being offset, like it's not in the middle of your grip. Like if you're doing that sort of thing with a dumbbell, it's just like your muscles essentially controlling that position. But because the weight is outside, then it's a bunch of different ways to stabilize with the shoulder, which is nice.
And it's possible, I don't know, because I've never played around with this, but depending on if somebody had a shoulder injury, like you might find that that injury is less aggravated with the loading either directly through or offset or whatever. Like, I don't know, but it's possible because of the way it acts on the shoulder differently. You may have some options available where, you can't press with a dumbbell, but maybe it feels okay with the kettlebell, for example, or vice versa.
Honestly, like I'm sure that situation exists. Just because, like, well, we were talking about fascia, like the variability is key to like expand the movement and, rebalance like the tension a little bit and increase proprioception, and then thus things like that. So, plus, I mean, like that kind of a thing could be an interesting teaching tool for someone that doesn't really understand how to, like position their elbow or position their shoulder in a pressing movement. Because it might, like having the kettlebell inside or outside like force them to be in a different position. Well, it would force them to be in a different position. So yeah, could be interesting. I haven't used it in that way, but it's an interesting idea anyway.
I was saying, I just thought of that now, but it would make sense that it could be used in that way.
Mm-hmm.
It would obviously very much depend on the situation, but
yeah.
Possibility.
Mm-hmm. I do also really like the racked position that you brought up. Partially because I like kettlebell cleans and kettlebell snatches, which you can do with a dumbbell, but again, it's not as good. But like I really like the goblet position, like holding a kettlebell out in front. And if you rack it, then you can do like it's like a double goblet essentially. So you can increase the weight like so much more. And we did that with the basketball guys when we were in Warrior Zone, the double racked kettlebell squats, because we couldn't go downstairs to use the actual barbell. So then that's a good way to get a good amount of weight, which it just puts a lot more load on like the shoulders and the torso, which for them I think was very beneficial because like they need the strength in the lower body, but there's a lot of upper body demand as well in basketball. So yeah, and it gives you more freedom of like where are you positioning the weight in relation to your body, which is nice for people with different leverages that maybe get in the way of them lifting with the barbell, or like mobility restrictions or whatever. Yeah.
The other thing I like about the half rack position, so where you only have the one kettlebell, sorry, on the one side, is that if you compare it to, like, some people will do that with a dumbbell, like, and they'll put the dumbbell on their shoulder, but you get some of that frontal plane instability because there's extra load on one side and not on the other. Same way if you suitcase hold a weight on one side and not the other, you get that instability. But what's interesting that I've found is that if you half rack the kettlebell, because it comes out and away from your body, there is a little bit more of a, like, the weight is out in front, so you have to make sure you don't allow yourself to collapse forward, in addition to the lateral instability you have with load on one side or the other. And because there's this load coming out and away from your body on one side, there's also temptation for that weight to, like, rotationally or in the transverse plane, pull you into one side, where if you hold a dumbbell or anything on one side and not the other, in like a suitcase style or just on top of your shoulder, you don't get that. I don't want to call it like 3D instability, but you can feel that you're fighting that half rack position in more planes of motion than you are in like just a suitcase. So if you had a dumbbell on one side and did a lunge, holding in your hand suitcase style, probably doesn't feel the same as where if you did a lunge with one kettlebell half rack on one side versus the other, because you're going to get more instability because the load is further away from you and your center of mass. And like you talked about before with the moment arms, gives you a little bit more like leverage that you have to work against. So that's one of the things I really like about the half rack position, is the added stability demands. So like, yeah, if you've done some suitcase carries, suitcase stuff, things like in that wheelhouse, and now you want to progress it a little bit, try and go half rack with the kettlebell, because it changes the movement quite a bit in terms of that variability of being stable in different positions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I agree for 100%. Yeah, I do like the half rack from that perspective. Like if you want anti-side flexion, then you can go with the suitcase, and if you want like sagittal plane stability, you can go with the goblet. But then that kind of gives you both, which is really nice. And I have tried the like half rack with a dumbbell, and like it's okay, but it's so much closer to the center of your body, so you're not getting as much of the side flex. It's really close, front and back, so you're not getting the sagittal either.
It's almost perfectly aligned in the sagittal plane.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it doesn't pull you forward, it doesn't pull you back. Like it doesn't act on you almost in that. That's
exactly.
when you maybe a bit like from a compression standpoint.
Yeah, and it's so light that it's not making a difference in that respect either. And
Yeah.
plus, like, it's not super stable on your shoulder. So I find like I'm using like my actual deltoid and like bicep, tricep to stabilize the thing. And like that's not what I'm versus here, it feels like it's attached to your torso almost. So you have to use your core to stabilize it, which is really nice. And plus, like maybe is just me being a power lifter or a former power lifter who doesn't have that much mobility, but like that kind of gets you like already extended versus here you can be locked down. You can be extended if you want, but you can be locked down, or you can take any position you want.
Yeah, if
Really.
you lock down with the dumbbell, you run the risk of like it starting to fall forward, not in a instability way where you have to fight it with the position, but like the dumbbell has nothing to rest on anymore. It's just going to fall forward.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's a lot more, I guess, freedom through restriction in that way, which is nice for sure. Mm-hmm. Do you like kettlebell complexes?
No, I do not. No, straight up.
Okay. Why?
Like you talk about like the flow stuff.
I don't know what the flow means. Like what do you
or
like from this position to that position to that position?
Yeah.
Like you're combining a bunch of different exercises.
Yeah.
Kind of thing?
Is that what you mean?
That is what I mean. Yeah. Like I
Yeah.
do.
So like I pick the kettlebell up off the floor and I do a kettlebell clean and then I squat down with it and then I come up and then I press it overhead and then I like that type of.
Yeah.
I mean, now some of them get real weird where people are like throwing and flipping the kettlebell and then catching it and then swinging it through their legs. And like some of it goes from like very standard, like you said, like clean, squat, press to like, it looks like a circus trick.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm personally not a big fan of any of those.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't think you need to be flipping or anything like that, but I do think like a complex, it's just an interesting way to combine some movements. And like if we're talking about like a low level day where you want to do like a little bit of conditioning and move around, and it's another way that keeps things interesting. And I think just the way that you can like swing a kettlebell around and like flip it and different things, like swinging it and then cleaning it and pressing it, or snatching it and pressing it, and whatever, like the variety of ways you can hold it and stuff, and it still feels stable. You can't do that with other pieces of, I think anyway, not as well.
No, I mean, you are right that the kettlebell does that better than any of the other piece of equipment. I just don't like that there's always a limiting factor.
Yes.
In the sense that if you're talking about, yeah, like I'm going from a swing to a clean to a squat to a press, probably that overhead press is like the limiting factor in that. So are you swinging the amount of weight you probably should? Debatable. Are you squatting the amount of weight you should? Debatable. Maybe you're cleaning a decent amount of weight and then you're pressing, sort of like maybe in the wheelhouse you're supposed to be in. So that's sort of my big reason I wouldn't really use them. I'd rather do more of like the stuff we talked about the last few episodes, and like the 3D movement and being in space differently and that type of stuff on my low level days. And I certainly would never use the complex. Oh, shouldn't say never. Very, very highly, definitely not likely that I would use a complex on like a bigger day, because again, something is going to have a limiting factor. And, if it's an appropriate weight to press, then we're just going to press it. I'm not going to throw in all the other stuff for no reason. So that's sort of where I could see if people liked it, or if you had a lot of kettlebells available that you'd want to use it on a low intensity or just a day to move around and be in different planes and do whatever. But I personally would just rather do that in other ways.
Yeah.
Rather than a kettlebell combo, personally.
Yeah, no, and that's fair for sure. I definitely agree. Like there is going to be a limiting factor, and like if you wanted to do strength stuff, then I wouldn't suggest a complex. Certainly.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm okay with some of the simple ones. I mean, if it looks like it belongs in the circus, then I definitely I don't want athletes flipping and throwing kettlebells and doing no, thank you.
No.
That's highway to the danger zone 100%. And
yeah,
we're not going that direction in training.
yeah, 100%. But yeah, it just can be a different way to move around, which is interesting. And like I said, I think the kettlebell does that better than anything else. And while we're talking about the kettlebell, might as well bring it up, you know.
But yeah, not a huge fan of the complex stuff personally. I think like if you want someone to feel like they're working hard, I think it'll do that because you basically never put the kettlebell down. So you're always under tension. You're always under load. So I think for like Gen Pop and people who just want to stay in shape and move around, I 100%, I think it's something different that you can throw in there. But I think if you have a more like focused or directed purpose towards your training, that's where I would tend to say, okay, we're not opening that part of the toolbox. We'll just leave it closed. And we won't dip into that.
Agree for sure. Yeah, it's not, I wouldn't say the complex, like, yeah, it's probably fun. If you wanted to do some well, I wouldn't say it's the best tool. If we're talking like adaptation wise, I wouldn't say that's the best tool for anything, probably.
No, I feel like it doesn't do any of those things well enough.
Not well. I think it can do everything like okay, but it doesn't do. I can't think of one thing other than training for specific kettlebell competitions that it would do better than like there's a better tool for that, you know.
Yeah, like if you're training for what is it called? Is it like kettlebell sport?
I don't know.
Sport?
I only heard about it through you, so
yeah, and I sort of randomly came across that. But yeah, they'll do like a swing into a like catch, and then they'll press overhead, and they just repeat for like 10 minutes and try to do as many as they possibly can. Yeah. Well, then yeah, the complexes effectively become your sport. So then training with that complex makes a lot of sense because it's directly what you're going to do. But for the most part, you know, I don't see the point like a rugby player doing that. I don't know where you're going to get an adaptation, for example, to help them in their sport or things like that. So obviously with the kettlebell sport, it's a little bit different because that's very functional in that sense because you are directly doing the exact same thing. It's effectively sport training in that case. But yeah, that's sort of my it works everything, but it doesn't work everything enough to actually make meaningful adaptation in my opinion. So that's where, to me, the complex is a tool that, yeah, I'm sure there's a few complexes I could put together if needed, but it's not like I'm taking that tool out of the toolbox on a daily basis and using it for people.
Yeah, that's fair. Is there anything else you got on your list there?
Well, we didn't even talk about the swing. Probably like the number one.
Well, that's true.
Like the number one reason you would buy a kettlebell, in my opinion, would be for the swing. Like I really like the swing personally. I think there's a lot of different things you can do with it. Don't swing it overhead. I can't stand the overhead swings.
Well, yeah, there's no reason to do that unless you want to get your shoulders involved. But
yeah, it doesn't make it.
Not a shoulder exercise. Yeah.
But I do like I think it's a great tool in the toolbox for like developing hip extension. And I like that it's like I wouldn't describe it as a like fast exercise, but I wouldn't describe it as like a pure strength exercise. It has this unique rhythmic strength and speed like demands in it, which I do like to have in certain phases within training.
I don't know if there's a better like weight room movement at teaching like the rhythm, the elasticity, that kind of a thing. Like it's not like every other strength movement is very pushy or pulley,
Yeah, it's like slow and grinding.
But this is like if you do a swing well and you feel it when it's wet and you can see it, like it's easy to see if it's executed well. And I don't know. I'd personally, surprisingly to me, sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to learn and teach.
It can be very difficult to teach people.
But yeah, like that's for like, yeah, elasticity in the hips and just feeling the rhythm. I think that's one of the best for sure.
Yeah, there's just so many things that I like doing with the, like, if you wanted to get away from like a hip thrust or an RDL or a deadlift in season, you could do a heavier kettlebell swing because it's still loading a fair bit, but it's fast enough that it's more of like a dynamic strength movement. Like you're never going to get speed on the barbell in an RDL or like a hip thrust or anything like that you will get the speed on the bell as you're swinging it back and forth. And again, like you mentioned, I like that rhythm aspect to it. Or you can also go, like, you can go lighter to teach the swing. You could go lighter and do like high volumes of the swing and use it as a conditioning tool. You can go substantially heavier and do 4 or 5 like heavy swings if you wanted to use more of like a dynamic strength activity, like in season, for example. Oh, we're going to take out RDLs, we're going to take out deadlift, something like that, but we're going to swing like a 50 kilo kettlebell. It's not going to be super fast relative to the other swings, but it's much more dynamic than an RDL, for example. And then you can use some variations with, bands or other things like that to really overspeed or get the eccentric loading or, that quick, like boom, boom, boom rhythm with the hips in terms of flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension, just ripping through. And I think it's underrated in the sense that your feet are planted on the ground. You get this violent, accelerated hip extension pattern without leaving the ground. So if impact is an issue, if ceiling height is an issue and you can't jump or things like that, I think there is the added benefit that it's virtually no impact. So if you still want to do hip extension stuff with a basketball player or a volleyball, I'll pick volleyball because they tend to track like jumping and foot contacts way more than basketball does. You could still go into the weight room and do some very fast, very explosive kettlebell swings, and you put no additional loading on their feet and shins as they're in terms of like foot contact, which I think is, if you did a squat, for example, like, oh yeah, we're just going to do an explosive squat, you're still going to like decelerate as you get to the top.
Yes.
Because you don't want to leave the ground. But with the kettlebell swing, you can violently, powerfully extend the hips as much as you want and you won't leave the ground.
Yeah. That's there's a couple of things there that I like a lot. Like I hadn't considered the no impact thing with it. Like that's a good point for somebody that, like maybe it's like a distance runner or something that needs to work on like the power element or like the conditioning element of it. Maybe it's more of like an anaerobic kind of a thing. But they've got shin splints or something like that, or someone's got a sprained ankle. They can load bear fine, but they, can't jump or anything.
The impact.
Yeah. Or like you can do swings if you're in a boot, as long as you can stand, you can do swings if you're in a boot, which would be great to like maintain a lot of the upper part of your jumping ability anyway, or running ability or whatever. So yeah, that's a great point. I really like the banded variation for sure to the overspeed, and especially if you go with a light kettlebell, that gets fast.
It's fast and it forces you to like, the first thing I think of is like the rhythmical change in sprinting where you have to move from like positive to negative movement. Right. Or in the sense of like you have positive swing where the leg is moving in the direction you're going, and then you rapidly transition to negative swing and the leg comes back the opposite direction. You get that same sort of quick. You're not trying to spend all day up at the top and then bring the kettlebell down. You're not trying to spend all day at the bottom and then bring it back up. You're trying to transition. The bell moves forward and then you're trying to get it moving back the other direction as quick as you can. And it's just swinging back and forth on a pendulum and you're trying to make those transitions as quick as possible. And the band really challenges that. If done well.
Yeah. And then the full, like you're accelerating all the way through hip extension, I think is a huge, like an underrated thing that you don't get with RDLs or deadlifts, or like when I read that in the Bill Parisi book, the fascia book, that made a lot of sense to me, that like that's why he does a lot of throws, like medball throws and stuff, because if you're throwing something, you can accelerate all the way through. You don't have to stop at the end of your throw like you do have to with any other barbell or dumbbell movement.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that's one of the reasons where like bands come into play with a lot of the powerlifting and stuff, right? Because you're effectively accelerating through the movement the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, and you do still, like, that's why people want to do it, is because you're accelerating through the movement. But even still, like, you do have to stop.
Yeah.
So you do have to slow down, versus with the kettlebell swing, I guess you do kind of, but you don't really have to.
Well, you slow down in the sense that you're transitioning now, going back as quick as you can the other way, right? Where it's no different. And then like I said, the leg and positive and negative swing and sprinting. It's constantly moving back and forth, but you're not trying to spend all day. You're not leaving the foot up there hanging and then waiting to bring it down. No, as soon as the foot's up there, bring it back down into the ground.
Yeah.
And as soon as it's off the ground, you're done applying force, boom, swing it back the other way. And the swing works the same way, where you're trying to transition in and out of those endpoints as quick as you can, but there's no fear of like, if I move too quickly, like I don't want to move too fast because I need to come to a standstill at some point. Like you're very rapidly moving in between those 2 points.
Yeah, exactly. And I see it from that perspective, but it also, like, if you go heavy, especially, and you allow yourself to be a little bit like slower in the transition anyway, it's almost like it's a repetitive throw for your hips. Versus
contract, relax.
Yeah.
You get that cyclic.
Yeah. Versus like every other throw for your hips would be like a jump or a sprint or something like that, which does have a lot of impact. And can be, well, I don't know. Like, do you think sprinting or jumping would be, depending on, I guess, where in the hamstring region? Like, do you think a kettlebell swing might be a little bit more sensitive to that kind of a thing? Or probably not? It would depend.
Do you mean if somebody had like a
banged
up hammy?
Yeah, like if someone's got a bit of a hamstring strain, then they can still typically do acceleration stuff. But
the angle's so open and upright, right? Yeah. Compared to like, so if you think, like someone's coming back a little bit from like tweaking their hamstring, we can get away maybe going 5-10 meters in terms of acceleration, because the knee angle is really close in the sort of like attacking the ground, pushing it away type of action, compared to being in that tall open where when you see the leg strike down, it's like almost completely straight. And the kettlebell swing would be in that same sort of position, right? Where the hand, like the knee's very open.
Yep.
And extended. So I would imagine it would not be the greatest, but I could see somebody potentially, and I've never tried it. Like, let's say somebody does tweak their hammy and they're at the stage where maybe they're accelerating and they can do some like 5 or 10 meters, like as long as, again, in that safe distance, maybe their RDL is pain-free. You might be able then, before you start to stretch them out further, sprinting, you may be able to, like, let's try the kettlebell swing.
Yeah, like a little introductory kind of that makes sense.
And see how that feels. And then if that feels okay, then it's like, okay, now maybe we take the actual on track or sprinting stuff a little bit further. There's a possibility that could work. I've never actually tried that, but if somebody, early on, I don't think I would use it with somebody coming back from a hammy, just because the knee angle is so open, and it does tremendously load the hamstring because it's like effectively all hip hinge. So
that's interesting though.
But it could be an interesting return to play, return to performance.
Yeah.
Tool to pull out somewhere.
Yeah. I do. Speaking of that, like I remember Stu talking about how it's very back friendly compared to other hip hinge movements. It is very back friendly. So, which typically hip hinge movements are some of the most aggravating things for
Yeah,
back
the
issues.
culprit.
So,
Yeah, now that you mention, I don't think I've ever had any type of pain or discomfort swinging kettlebell.
yeah. Yeah, I remember he did. There's a paper. I never read the paper, but he talked about the paper in class. So,
Yeah, and that could be like, what's the heavy? How much could we get that T-bar in the weight room up to in Waterloo? That was
oh,
like what, 150 pounds if you maxed it out because it had room for X number of 25s, like 25-pound plates.
yeah, something like that probably.
So I mean, I've
Or
swung them things.
35s maybe fit on it.
Yeah, so I probably swung anywhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 150 pounds,
Yeah.
and never, ever, ever had any back issues. And my back is more than prone to being aggravated to, that type of stuff. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have also seen, well, it's interesting too. Like, I guess, do you think the like single arm loading or like double arm, but with two different kettlebells is an interesting thing? Or do you think that's circus stuff?
like where like one kettlebell is 50 kilos and the other one's 30, for example.
Well, or you can have like 240-kilo kettlebells and then you just get more load that you can swing and they're both going in between your legs at the same time. Um,
Oh, I've never really done a double kettlebell swing, just because it like alters the foot position.
yeah, you got to go wider. That's true.
Yeah, and I'd rather keep like a closer.
Have you done single arm, like one kettlebell, single arm?
I have not, just because it take like most of the reason why I do like personally do the kettlebell swing or with the athletes I work is the speed on the hip extension.
Right.
And I do find that even though in theory you're still like your hips are still subjected to the same load. Like if I have a 30-kilo kettlebell, for example, and I swing it with one arm or two arms, my hips are still being exposed to 30 kilos of load, but the speed is nowhere near as high because you can't lock down on the kettlebell as well and help it
Yeah.
change direction.
Yeah.
And what I'm really looking for with the athletes I work with out of the kettlebell swing is the speed on hip flexion, hip extension.
Mm-hmm.
And so anything that takes away from the speed of that movement, I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And so in that's where I won't use the single arm swing. And I don't tend to use like kettlebell snatch or kettlebell clean in any way, shape, or form. So, which would be the only reason to me to be very proficient and very good at the single arm swing is because you would need it as a prereq to be able to do those types of patterns. But I don't really tap into those for the people I train.
I was just thinking about it. Like, I guess I actually don't know. I would need to feel it, I think, or see some research on it. I don't know. I was thinking
There's
about
much
it.
research on that stuff, which is that's what makes it kind of tough. I don't even know how you'd measure it either.
Well, yeah, I don't know, but yeah, but I guess I think feeling it would be enough, just to see, because I had thinking that if you have it in one arm, then that's some sort of like obviously you're using both legs, both hips, but it's a little bit of like that cross body loading in that way. Like you're loading one side of your torso, but if you're swinging it from your hips, like especially knowing that it is very back friendly, like I don't know how much you actually are loading your torso. So maybe it wouldn't make that much of it.
Yeah, that's true. Like I said, I've never really thought about using the single arm swing in any of my like inventory of stuff that I pick from. Because again, I'm purely looking at the kettlebell swing as a low or like no impact, high velocity hip action. Yeah. And so I'm playing around with either loading it a little bit lighter as we teach the movement or loading it heavier to use as a strength substitute or more of a dynamic strength exercise, or banding it up and doing things like that to get that like big time over speed effect and things like that. So I've never actually thought about going single arm because it would either limit the loading to use it as a substitute for heavy hip hinging, or it would limit the speed on like a standard or banded kettlebell swing.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Good stuff, man. Yeah.
But I mean, the swing is
a
still
lot.
a great tool, I think, to use.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot. Yeah. A lot you can do with it. I haven't used it very much with my powerlifters. I've started using it a little bit more on their deload weeks to get like some elastic hip hinging work in, because it's all very rigid, the hip
Yeah,
hinging work that they do. So
grindy.
yeah, I've been trying to get a little bit more of that like elastic kind of, partly for variation and partly just for like health and things like that. And yeah, the kettlebell swing is definitely the best hip hinge version of that. So yeah, that's awesome, man. A lot to be done.
Yeah, like I said, there's things you can do with the kettlebell. Is it the greatest tool in the world? No, but nothing is.
Yeah,
because everything's going to have the strengths and weaknesses, and so
it is interesting to me that there's some exercises that like you could do very well with a dumbbell, but kettlebell is just in my head anyway, and that probably came from the people that I like was like first receiving programming from or like learning about this stuff from. Just like the standard is you do it with a kettlebell, like a goblet squat, you do it with a kettlebell, or a kettlebell RDL, you do it with a kettlebell. You don't do it like you can do it with dumbbells, but like it seems like the kettlebell is the standard, or a Turkish get up, you do it with a kettlebell, which is just interesting to me.
yeah, that is kind of true now that you say that. I mean, there was a relatively large kettlebell culture at Waterloo, and we had no shortage of like kettlebells there. So,
I mean, they were heavy.
Yeah, we had 2 sets of one downstairs, one upstairs. I think it was like what, the 90 pounds?
Oh yeah, that's right.
From like
80 pounds.
5, yeah, 5. So you had doubles of every 5-pound increments all the way up. So you had kettlebells for days. So if you wanted to play around with that stuff. So I feel like part of it came from that. They were readily available. It wasn't this like foreign alien tool.
Yeah.
And we're like, what's that thing? So it was very normalized in our like lifting environment, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I do remember that there was a few kettlebell regulars that I saw.
Yes, I would agree with that. They probably should have taken advantage of more of the stuff that was there besides just the kettlebells, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The one guy that I'm thinking about was pretty ripped, and he was very good at Turkish get-ups.
Very good at Turkish get-ups, like quite spectacular to watch.
Yeah, which I really enjoy those personally as well. But yeah, that's fun. Always interesting to explore different things you can do with different pieces of equipment.
You never know when you might need them.
That's right. That's right.
We had a lot of them available. It was one of the only things we could use at Waterloo. And other places may have none of them. So you have to know all the different tools and know how you might use them, because you never know what environment you're going to end up in.
Yeah, that's right. It's also interesting to experiment and learn what you can do with different types of music. And this is a rare double music episode. 2 music conversations.
The only double music episode so far.
Yeah.
But that one was like the beginning was more nostalgic, kind of blast from the past. This is now like what's happening right now.
Yeah, that's right.
In our current iterations of ourselves.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So what were you playing around with, or were you playing this week still?
No. I've figured it out. So it's now on my playlist of like my jam session. Okay. So Rasputin will make it on the list. But I've been listening. I've found a band a few weeks. Band. They might be one person. I'm not 100% sure. You never know with these synthwave groups. It could be one person with a synthesizer that plays every part of the music. But a musical act, I will call them, called Miami Nights 1984. And it's like very 80s, very synth. Like you can envision driving down in a convertible vehicle at night, and there's palm trees on either side of the road, and your vehicle has pop-up headlights and all that type of stuff. But the music was written like 3 weeks ago, type thing. So, but yeah, it's been like really, really catchy. We practice late at night, so I got like a 10 or 15-minute drive to get home, and it's dark, and so it's like chill nighttime driving music. So when I'm in the car, Spotify, boom, give me some Miami Nights 1984 for my 15-minute cruise home. So catchy stuff.
Very good. Very good. It is always interesting to me when you bring up groups that like it sounds like it's from the 80s or the 60s or whatever, but it's not. It's
Well, that's true, because a few weeks ago I was listening to Volbeat, who had some of that old school sound to them.
Yeah.
Even though they're like a modern band.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. But I mean, obviously there's a market for it. So I was listening to Skylar Grey, who is strongly affiliated with like the Eminem, Dr. Dre, all those kinds of that crew. So I don't remember. I Need a Doctor. I think that's what it was. That was like the first Skylar Grey song I had heard, which is like it's an Eminem song featuring Skylar Grey and Dr. Dre. And I think Dr. Dre was like supposedly the doctor. That might have been why it was called that.
That would make sense.
And then more recently, it wasn't actually in the movie, but in the trailer to Venom: Let There Be Carnage, which was a pretty good movie, better than the original. But in the trailer, there was a Skylar Grey song also featuring Eminem and a couple other rappers called Last One Standing, I think. And that is a very good song, in my personal opinion. So I was just listening to a little bit more stuff, which it was all like pretty okay. She has like some covers of like really classic songs that I didn't know about that were interesting. Mostly she's like the one who sings the chorus, and then there's other rappers doing the verses and stuff. Which I like that stuff. So
copy paste.
Yeah.
I'll sing this once and you can just paste it 4 other times in the song as many times as needed. Boom, done.
Yeah. But she does have solo stuff too, which is interesting. Her voice is nice. And personally, when I listen to rap songs, I like a good beat, a good chorus, and good flow from the rappers, but the words aren't that important to me, if I'm being honest.
Everybody take note.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was interesting. I was just shooting a basketball, listening to some Skylar Grey.
Oh,
November. So it was a little bit chilly, but it was nice.
Taking old school back to the basketball days.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, that was good. That was fun. This is 3 weeks in a row recording. So
I'd say we're officially back.
We're back at it.
And I got my sound in here figured out, so it doesn't sound like I'm in a cave underground. We are officially back.
Yeah, there we go.
So
there we go. Yeah, so we'll look forward to the next one. If anybody has any ideas what they want us to talk about, it, let us know. Speed Strength Show, Speed Strength Performance, or Braden Southern on Instagram. Until then, that was the Speed Strength Show. Thanks for coming along, world.
We'll see you next time.
Peace.